Thanks very much, Tim, for inviting me to speak here. Tim asked me to give a very sort of snappy, sort of wacky title, and I wish I hadn't actually given him that one now, but I'll do my best. So higher education's free and feral. Let's see how we get on with this one. In terms of technology, my sort of take on technology is to make technology invisible. I'm coming from this talk, I guess, from the perspective of a faculty member, an academic member of staff who has to teach students day in and day out and deal with all these sort of bits and pieces around sort of administration. I guess the last thing that I want to do is to go into a lecture room and be faced with a load of wires where I need a PhD from CERN to actually understand how to switch things on and off. This is really quite key. We talk a lot about student engagement, and I think there's a reasonable appreciation within the environment, within communities and within educational sectors that our students are pretty well switched on in terms of technology. I think the real challenge is faculty, staff, in terms of getting them engaged. And I think there's a disjunct there in terms of the relative degrees of engagement. So I'm coming from the point of view of my job, which is the University of Sussex, sort of moved away from the frontline teaching now and moved into more of the so-called strategizing about technology and how we can actually make that better for all concerned. My sort of take on technology is not only about making technology invisible, but making technology work in such a way that for users and practitioners, it's about plugging things in and it just working. So I don't have the sort of issues that I had before I started this talk with trying to get my Mac to talk to the projector, because that's often happened when I'm faced with 250 students trying to teach them first year biochemistry, for example. That really shouldn't happen, and I guess that's a real challenge for the people promoting the cloud. Why isn't there a system, you're probably going to tell me there is a system, where I can put my Apple Keynote presentation on the web, and no matter where I am in the world, I can just draw it down and use it off any machine. Something like that would be really good in terms of being able to do things in relation to a cloud sort of setting. But to have facilities and to be thinking about things such that platforms are integrated, the tools and kit are really easy to use. And I guess the way I like to think about IT in the way of using technology is to use the I want some hot water analogy. When I get home at night and I want to make a cup of tea and I want to boil some water, all I have to do is obviously fill the kettle and press the switch and it boils the water. I don't really care about the national grid and how it's all connected and security of energy supplies. That doesn't really bother me. And what I want at the end of the day is something that just works. And similarly, when I plug something in to the wall, I just expect it to work. The actual underlying technologies and how it all works is important in terms of providing the service. But as a user, it just needs to be really, really simple. One of the other issues that I think we're facing from a whole variety of angles is thinking about how we actually future-proof what we do and how we can save ourselves from the shock of rapid changes within an environment that's changing all the time. So there's, of course, there's the well-quoted Moore's law about processing power doubling after every 18 months and the prices of computing power actually falling. So how do we actually get ourselves into a system whereby we can actually think about that and prevent us from using kit that as soon as we buy it, it's out of date? So, I mean, one of the questions that I've often thought about is that for universities, why are we actually buying kits? Why aren't we renting it? Why aren't we leasing it? So as soon as I buy, a computer, as soon as it hits my desk and it's all plugged in, it's going to be out of date fairly soon. It's going to be slow, and it just seems an interesting way of actually running a business. You're going to buy something, and it's going to be out of date fairly soon. So I guess the question is, how do we ensure that we get the investment right in the people, the facilities, and the technologies that's going to stand the test of time? Because every day there seems to be a new something coming along, but something else we have to look at. The latest being Google Wave. I mean, what's all that about? I mean, how do I actually get academic staff at the University of Sussex actually interested in Google Wave? What's it going to do for them? What's cloud computing going to do for them? All these are I know there are questions and I'm not providing any answers, but in terms of doing the sell to colleagues, I think this is really important in terms of all the other things that we have to do with our time. Okay. I just wanted to, I know at least one person in the room has already seen this map, but this is just an interesting sort of point to show how many higher education institutions there are in the UK. We're a fairly small island and we're fairly crowded. Very, very crowded. But it's a really good time to work in HE, and that's because excellence is everywhere. No matter which university you go to, there will be something in a prospectus, in a strategy magazine, where everything's world-class, it's cutting edge, this university has high graduate salaries, excellent teaching and excellent facilities, all that sort of embodied within a very sort of crowded place. And the other question I have, if I can just take my own little environment, I work at the University of Sussex, which is down there, at the bottom of the map. It's not really in the sea, but literally just across the road there's the University of Brighton. So if I was an accountant sort of looking at all this crowdedness, I would say, why are there two IT departments in a university that's separated by a main road called the A27? What's all that about? How can we actually justify that as a cost? So there are different sets of boxes living in different buildings with different names on them, different logos. Are we really doing things in each of those different universities that is so remarkably different that means that we can't have a common system? Because that's what I want, I guess, as a user. I want to go to a number of universities if I'm talking and look at being able to use things that are the same. Unless there are markedly different sort of ways in which people are doing things, of course. Okay. So there are certainly challenges. Although we live in a happy environment in HE where everything is excellent, there are challenges for institutions. One of the things that I'm acutely aware of in my other role as somebody who's involved in the more managerial aspects of my university is that we need to be looking at how we can be more efficient in what we do. How do we actually encompass and manage and rip through the paperwork that we have to do and all the processes and all the operations? There's a whole series of things that we do that surely we could be doing certainly much more smartly. And we need to reduce costs, I believe, because we're all aware of the situation we're in the current climate. I don't see there going to be a huge amount of money flooding into universities after the next general election, for example. So that's something else we need to be aware of. But balanced against that, institutions, as you saw, we are in a very, very crowded sort of place where we do our business. We need to, I believe, be looking at maximum flexibility for our students. So I'm going to be giving lectures in first year biochemistry next week, and I'm going to be faced with our new sort of intake of students. But that model might actually change where students are sitting there in fixed lecture theatres with the sage on the stage actually giving a presentation. What we could be looking at in the future is, and I guess we are in some senses already, looking at providing flexibility for people who learn and earn at the same time, with people going back to university. I think there's going to be an issue for some universities within the next two to 3 years where the demographic shift means there are going to be simply less 18-year-olds around. Less people being born. So that's about also providing maximum flexibility to increase student satisfaction as well. A key metric for universities is look at the National Student Survey. And they expect all this technology that we're talking about just to work and really enhance their learning. But I think one thing is certain, there is certainly going to be not as much money around to play with, if that's the right term, certainly after the next general election. Now, some of my thunder on free was actually stolen, not literally, but reported in last week's Times Higher. And the free in the sense that at the moment there appears to be this sort of trend, I wouldn't call it a movement necessarily yet, about providing educational content for free. Using various platforms, a good example would be iTunes U, where a vast amount of information and content of varying quality, I have to say, is out there for people to have a look at. And I think this issue of what's free is an interesting concept because our students, who appear always to be connected, always online, and if anybody's got teenage daughters, they'll know what I mean, always on the phone, always on the internet, always connected. And I think there's a trend where they are almost expecting stuff for free. One example of that, I think, is the recent sort of issue with Spotify, which is a way of actually getting music available over the internet for free. Spotify have put an app on Apple's App Store, advertising it for free. And I was quite surprised to look at the comments that the customers have put on about Spotify, the little app. There have been 10,000 comments, and it hasn't actually been on there a long time. 8,000 of those comments are negative, because people are expecting Spotify to provide music for them for free. So again, there's this sort of disjuncture that I think people are going to be less and less willing to pay for stuff and expecting it for free. But of course, as the Times Higher points out, universities, I guess, aren't really giving away the content for free. They're expecting some sort of return on their investment, and certainly using it as a marketing tool appears to be one of the key attributes of using something like iTunes U. I think one of the issues, and I couldn't remember why I put feral in the title until I remembered about how we can sort of, or how to think about how we engage academic members of staff in particular in embracing new technologies. And somebody once told me it's like dealing with academics and trying to manage them is like herding cats. And that's where the feral came from. I couldn't really think of any other context. But again, the students are okay with this. The blockage to change, I guess, in terms of how we can use technology more efficiently, smarter, help the students who are very busy nowadays, doing all sorts of different things in addition to their studies. The resistance to probably the change is probably going to be the academic members of staff in some regards, and also maybe senior management who don't quite understand some of the issues around technology in education. Okay, what I was going to talk about in relation to, people have been asking about what's in it for companies, about offering stuff for free. Before I talk about the long tail, a good book to read entitled Free is by Chris Anderson, who talks about the new model of business actually being in free, but not really free, providing tantalizing stuff that people can actually buy into for free. And then, of course, I guess by getting an aggregate group of people together, start charging a premium for add-ons, extra bits and pieces, whether it's without advertising, whether it's more storage space, whether it's faster streaming. But what I wanted to talk about was something called the long tail. And I guess this is about looking at some of the numbers of downloads of material that's actually been put on iTunes U. There seems to be an absolutely fantastic, huge numbers of downloads in quite sort of obscure areas of subjects, some sort of aspects of philosophy and fine art. Now, Chris Anderson proposed that the internet and doing things is actually changing the way that economics works in terms of actually moving us, at least to the possibility of actually having niche markets where we have this long tail. And this long tail actually never actually goes to zero, because of infinite shelf space. It means that you can actually provide fairly niche stuff, records, films, movies, whatever, lectures, to a vast audience. And even though it's a tiny fraction, the number of downloads that you get is absolutely enormous. So hopefully, this will have some sound.
We are told that success is measured by bestsellers, blockbusters, and hits. But what about the infinite number of non-hits? In the internet age of unlimited choice, these misses are now easily available to us. Obscure films, new music, specialist books. Our demand for the niche grows. Suddenly, the misses are becoming as profitable as the hits. This is the theory of the long tail, and it's revolutionizing the way we live.
So there appears to be these sort of large numbers of downloads, and there almost appears to be an unlimited appetite for all sorts of information, videos, films, lectures, that actually makes it worthwhile to actually do things in the digital age. Just to come back to looking at a bit of a contrast, really, a study was done on web-based learning technologies and the future practices in learning and teaching by a group of Australian universities. And this goes to the, I think, the heart of the divide, or at least as people imagine it. And that's just these two sort of comments, really, that in terms of the key findings of the report, 67% of students compared with 30% of staff agreed that the web-based learning technologies actually help them achieve better results. And 80% of the students, compared with 49% of staff, agreed that web-based learning made it easier for the students to learn. So I guess there are these, in terms of differences of views and standpoints, these are really the sort of key, I wouldn't say battleground, but really key issues in relation to how we are going to manage our business. And I think it's important in terms of staff engagement and staff buy-in, assuming the students are already engaged. I think we need to be able to demonstrate to staff that the way we do things isn't just going to be something else they have to do. I think there needs to be some sort of showing that what we do actually is going to make life a lot easier for them. So coping with email, coping with student inquiries, can we use technology to actually aid them in their productivity? And I think that's what Gartner sort of highlighted in one of their white papers as a key challenge for institutions to actually look at. Okay, now I was going to just continue something about free. I put a short clip on there from Chris Anderson's promo about his book, The Long Tail, but his other book, Free, which is a relative new book, is certainly worth reading in terms of looking at new business models around free. But I was trying to think of what's out there that could actually help students now. Now, in terms of things out there, there's a lot of stuff out there that can be downloaded for free and can be used by students and others. I'm just picking on the iPhone simply because 93% of iPhone owners have actually added an app. And one of the apps I'm going to be just highlighting is something called Evernote, which I think is something that lives in the cloud, although I appreciate from what they talked this morning, the definition of the cloud isn't that straightforward. But Evernote, well, why would I like Evernote as an academic member of staff and try to view it as the way that why would it be useful to my students? Well, something like this, which is free, I can download it onto my computer. I can access it anywhere, Mac, PC. Also, if I do have an iPhone, I think it might actually work with some of the newer smartphones as well. I can actually do things. I don't need any fancy knowledge of how to switch things on and off. I just touch various of those icons. I can record a voicemail message. I can take text. I can take snapshots of what's on a whiteboard. If I'm on a field trip, if I'm doing some ecology work, I can actually take pictures of the flowers and plants and the environment I'm working in. And, they're also geotagged as well, so I don't have to write down the map coordinates. And all that is all done handheld, and it's free. Although it's not really free, what they provide you is something for free, but of course, because I'm a bit of a sucker for these sort of things, I've upgraded to premium, which means I don't get adverts and I get more space and it's slightly faster. But it is free if you want to do it. And this is, again, just a short demonstration, hopefully.
This is Evernote 3.0 for iPhone 3.0. With Evernote, you can take text notes, snap photos, pull photos from your camera roll, or record a voice memo with our newly redesigned voice recorder. It starts recording automatically and saves your note with a single click. Evernote 3.0 makes finding notes a whole lot easier. Just tap on Notes and start scrolling. You can keep scrolling without ever reloading the page. Tap on the eye to change how the notes are grouped. Here I'm going to try city. You see how the names of the cities are now scrolling up as I scroll through the notes? That's where these notes are created. Tap on the pin to plot your notes on a map. Zoom in to see more notes. Tap on the bar along the bottom of the map to view all the visible notes in a list. Or tap on a single note to view it. Turn your iPhone or iPod Touch on its side and scroll through an infinite wall of thumbnails. Tap and hold the note to see its title, let go, and it opens up. These are just some of the new features in Evernote 3.0 for iPhone and iPod Touch. Get it for free from the Apple App Store.
So it's free, and you can get it quite easily. What I think technology has to do for me, as somebody coming out of the technology and education sector, somebody who turns up, has to teach students, has to manage courses and programs, the technology has to be as simple as that. It has to be as simple. When I try and explain to one of my colleagues the new upgrades to Moodle, which is our VLE, which is free, except it isn't really free because we have to support it, I said, oh, it's got a drag and drop facility. And they said, what's drag and drop? This is, you know, was quite a surprise, but I think if people are coming up with those comments, that's what we have to target. Actually targeting the students and sort of getting them on side isn't the issue, it's the staff, I think. And this is just a very short clip taken from another university's competition when they asked students, what will the future of technology look like in 2020?
All right, Nan, it's Josh.
Oh, hello, Josh. How was it at university?
Well, I stayed in bed for my first podcast lecture today. When I did go in, it was great. They've got train and tram stops at campus. It's a very environmental uni. They've got plugins for electric vehicles and extra spaces for bikes and solar cars.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's the first zero-carbon uni. The buildings are amazing. Geothermal heating, loads of natural light to cut down on energy use. They've got solar panels and rooftop gardens.
So what's it like to learn in then?
The technology is fantastic. We had a group mind mapping session today using a big screen mind mapper.
Well, fancy that.
They've got a no-book library. All the books are archived onto e-paper books. They have a screen that looks exactly like paper, but it's much easier to read than normal screens and you can access it anywhere.
Oh, my word.
You never guess what? We had a tutorial yesterday by this Chinese professor. I couldn't understand him one bit. Then we were given an iLingua translator. You plug it in and it translates automatically. Didn't half help at the bar last night.
Oh, naughty.
Doorbell's just rang. Gotta go, Nana. Bye.
Bye.
So I think that's quite old, actually. I was hoping that nobody else had seen it. If we want to ask about what is the future of technology in education, we got a wealth of potential answers, and that would be useful, actually, to ask our students, and I don't think we necessarily engage with them enough. And I'd just like to thank you for listening. Thank you.